Hi, everyone. I know you're going to love this again because a lot of you listened to the beautiful conversation I had with Suzy Miller, who I have here today again. This was about 2 months ago we spoke, Suzy, back in January, and we just had it was so it's so consciousness expanding for me. I was kind of losing vocabulary by the end. It was just a magical conversation, and I hope we'll touch a lot of hearts in our conversation today. So for those of you who didn't hear that, I'll put the link for that conversation beneath this video. And for those of you who don't know Suzy, she has had extraordinary courage and dedication, I want to say, in her career, because she started off as a pediatric speech language pathologist, but for the last 30 years, she's worked with non-verbal autistic children. You may have heard about her in the telepathy tapes as well. So she's a visionary speaker, she's a multidimensional communicator, she's incredibly psychically gifted, she's an integration specialist, and she's author of a book, and I love the title, Awesomeism. A new way to understand autism. So I'll put the link for your website below, Suzy, because that is just so rich with gifts and offerings for people. And so I'll put that below so you can follow Suzy's work. But welcome, first of all. It's wonderful to be back in conversation with you again.
It's nice to be back with you too, Pam.
So I'd love to start because I know you've done a lot of channeling on Three Eye Atlas, and that kind of came out of the blue because it was the Autist, wasn't it, that connected you originally to Three Eye Atlas. You weren't very aware of it, but since that time you were producing some beautiful channelings and insights, and because it had its final flyby past Jupiter just a few days ago, really, March 16th, I'd love to ask you what effect you think that had on Jupiter. What also, in more detailed question, really, what effect it had as it was closest to the other planets, the Sun, Venus, Mars, etc. So that's going to be quite a big answer, but I'd love to understand from your gifted perspective how you feel it has gifted us and how you feel it's changed the solar system, us, our relationship to it, the whole caboodle.
Big question, yeah. So, I, like you said, when I first looked at Three Eye Atlas, it was because of the autistic individuals saying this interstellar consciousness is so much more like we are. It's so much more like it's almost like it's bringing something into our field, into the collective human field, that is going to be much more coherent, much more whole, you might say. And then when I started looking at Three Eye Atlas for the Jupiter session, especially, Three Eye Atlas literally said first, it wanted us to know, and it makes me smile to say this because, like you just said, I'm not used to connecting with interstellar objects, but that's exactly what happened here. So, Three Eye Atlas literally said, you see this interstellar object that's floating through space as separate from you or as something that is altering your reality. And it is, but please understand that it is a manifestation of what's already changed within us. And so collective humanity had already shifted in such a way that they could allow, in many ways, this interstellar object to move through our solar system. And it went on to share information about as it passed by each one of the planets that it interacted with, that it was doing something very specific for the collective consciousness, for the macrocosm, but also within us in the microcosm. And so the first thing it said is that when it passed by Mars, that our collective relationship with Mars has been war, the planet of war, or that's how most people understand it. That's all I knew about it. And But Three Eye Atlas said as it was passing by Mars, it was altering our relationship with war. And it took it to a more personal level where it asked, where do we war with certain aspects of ourselves? Where are we at war with certain um, dynamics within ourselves? We're allowed to be this, we're not allowed to be that. Where are we in a performative state versus a presence state? It was talking about those kinds of things. And so it made sense to me that if we're warring within ourselves, and we've been conditioned to do that through eons of time, if we're warring with ourselves, then of course Mars is going to be the planet of war, and of course war is going to be predominant on our planet. And so Three Eye Atlas just kept saying, like, the more that we're not warring with what's going on inside of us, the more the outer landscape can reflect that war can ease. We can die down on that dynamic. So it went by Mars, and then it immediately went from there to Venus. So when I asked about Venus, and especially coming right off of looking at, well, where do we war within ourselves? Venus, the planet of love. And I know these are very basic, for an astrologer. This is very basic. But I loved the idea that right after we came out of looking at where we war within ourselves, that we were next met with the planet of love, with Venus. And Three Eye Atlas said at that point, now we're infusing that energy of separation within us with love, compassion, understanding. So, and this goes hand in hand with a lot of what the autistic individuals have shared too. It's they don't want any of us to be perfect. They want us to be able to love all the different aspects of ourselves. So that went hand in hand as well. So once we opened up to, where are we separate within ourselves? Where do we war with certain aspects of ourselves? Then moving on to Venus, how can we love, have compassion, understanding for that within ourselves? Of course, whatever we do for ourselves, we can do for the collective. Whatever we do for ourselves, humanity will reflect back. And then Three Eye Atlas did something really amazing. It, hid right behind our sun, or at least that's the way it looked to me. And as it was hiding right behind our sun, there was an exchange of energy between Three Eye Atlas and the sun. And so all of that solar activity that we were having about the same time, all that, the difference in the Schumann, all of the things that were happening at that time, that's where we were really getting this new pattern of, like, literally in our DNA, like opening that up within our cells, within our DNA. So we've moved past, or moved through, you might say, separation energy. We've learned to love, have compassion and understanding for that. Now Three Eye Atlas is broadcasting that literally right into our DNA. And as we have that even more strongly within us, right? Of course, it makes it that much easier to mm, experience that, on a very real level. So we had the broadcast, the change in our DNA, the alterations there, and then Three Eye Atlas moved by Earth, made its closest bypass to Earth. And at that point, it felt like, to me anyway, Pam, like all of this was, it was not only getting grounded, you might say, but it was also altering our relationship to this planet that we find ourselves on. We've come here for a very specific reason, not just for this planet, but for, universes, right? This is a piece in the puzzle, and we're here now altering ourselves from the inside out to create change, not just here, but from my vantage point within all it is. And so, as it made its pass by Earth, one of the things that I was really noticing is it was almost like there was more permission to be whole. There was more permission to um, love different aspects of myself. I was watching this within my community as well. There was more, it just felt the permission was from the inside out. Yeah, it's like the DNA was giving us permission now. And so we had that connection to Earth. And I truly believe that that alteration of our relationship to this planet is just going to expand and expand. And I think it's going to expand exponentially because when Three Eye Atlas made its pass by Jupiter, just what, 10 days ago or so, it felt to me like it ignited the whole thing. It was almost like it enhanced our capacity to, I don't know, speak about these things, speak from these places within ourselves to reclaim some ancient wisdom that, quite frankly, I think has always been there, but has just been so covered up by separation energy. And to me, it felt like Three Eye Atlas very methodically, we change this, we change this, we alter that, we ground this, we expand it out. And now you have that as a template to evolve into and through. I also think it's the first of many interstellar objects that are going to be flying through or looping through in order to reflect back to us where we are now, each step of the way. So I got really excited about it. I was glad that the kids, pointed me in that direction. And like I say, I know the explanation of the planets is minute compared to what an astrologer can do with that information. But I think it had to be simple for me so that I could see the vastness of it. It's like it's something about the simplicity of this happens, this happens, this happens. It's like, oh, okay, that's within each and every one of us. We're holding those new templates. And so we get to broadcast that out and
Beautiful.
see
No,
the
no,
effect.
don't feel it's too simplistic. I think that's where we've been. I really do, Susie. So, but yeah, there's been quite an energetic shift. Just sticking to where Jupiter was when Three Eye Atlas flew by it. It was at 15 of Cancer, and that's its most exalted degree, out of the 360. But Cancer, of course, as you know, is ancestral wisdom, ancient wisdom, but it's also conjunct Sirius, our spiritual sun, because Sirius in the zodiac, tropical Western zodiac, is at 14 degrees of Cancer. So it was
Mm.
within 1 degree of that, very, very tight. Do you have any sense of a meaning of that? That it happened because it was absolutely in line with Sirius, our spiritual sun?
Well, there's a couple things I can say about that. One, I think that this is the whole thing is about our spiritual evolution. It's about that evolution of human consciousness. And again, I can say that things are already shifting within each and every one of us. And Three Eye Atlas comes through to represent that in a pretty big way. I mean, literally in a vast way. I also had heard a long time ago through autistic individuals as well that Sirius, that every soul that comes into embodiment comes through Sirius. And as they come through Sirius, energetically, however you want to perceive that, that's when we would kind of lose our memory. We would forget who we were in truth. It's where we became, I would say we might get acclimated to where we were going to be incarnating planet Earth, right? In one of the things that I had heard is in 2018, souls no longer had to come directly through Sirius, that they could come directly from the different places of origin that their souls were most comfortable with or most familiar with. But I also find it interesting that if Sirius was right there as Jupiter was doing that, as Three Eye Atlas was doing that flyby by Jupiter, again, that representation of we're not bound by falling asleep anymore. We're not bound by losing our memory of who we are in truth. And not only that, but whatever Three Eye Atlas did in that trajectory, it was bringing that ancient wisdom back to the surface, is what it felt like to me. And I'm not, my perception is not that we're having to necessarily like ascend to this state of consciousness. I think that is our state of consciousness. We just have been so conditioned into separation, warring with ourselves, these different things that we don't know who we are in truth. We don't remember who we are in truth. I think that's all coming back. And especially with Sirius in the mix.
Yeah, it's really beautifully said, Susie, because, I so often say it isn't just an out there, it's an in here. Because
Yes,
when I look at a birth chart, in that sacred moment, I'm looking at a map of the heavens, but at the same moment, I'm looking at that person's psyche.
yes.
It's a, as above, so below. It really is the Hermetic principle. So, I'm really resonating with what you're saying. And wherever we are in our present is merely a product of our past collective consciousness. And I think we often sort of overlook that. So where we are right now with the state of the world and the war and the chaos, etc., is what our past collective consciousness has produced. But now, and it's so graphic and crazy, it's making more and more of us wake up to the fact that we just don't want to live like this anymore. So let's
Well,
change
it's our,
the
yeah, it's our collective hidden shadow.
yeah.
And, those of us watching some of this might say, well, I don't do those things. That's not within me. But but the fact is that there are all kinds of um, separations within us. There's all kinds of shadows within all of us. And I think the other thing to remember is that we've all played all kinds of roles in our numerous incarnations on this planet. I happen to believe that it's not just this incarnation that is creating the the dismantling of this old world and creating a new world. I think that this is eons of time that we've come to this place. And so now all of that collective shadow through multiple lifetimes is rising up to the surface. I also remember that it's just coming so clearly right now. In 2016, Pam, we did a live event in Scottsdale, Arizona. And during that live event, the autistic individuals, the collective of that, said that the underworld had closed. And I was like, I don't know what that means. Like, what does that mean? The underworld is closed. And they meant that there was going to be it was no longer going to be available to us to push things back down, to hide things. And then, sure enough, that was 2016. And I know in my own life in 2016, some of the things that I thought I had dealt with a long time ago were all kind of bubbling back up to the surface. And as they bubbled back up to the surface, then we have COVID, and then we have all these other experiences where things are just rising up to the surface. And now it's in full bloom. I mean, we're seeing all of that energy. I see that as a tragic to look at, tragic to see, and also so positive because We can't change what we can't see.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
we can't choose again if we don't know what we're choosing from. And
Exactly.
so this very opportunity to see these things and go, yep, I see it, and that's not where we're going.
Yeah, beautiful. Yeah, I so agree with that, Susie. I really do. And, I so often say that we can't build a more loving world on rotten foundations. We have to see it and take spiritual responsibility, but also commit with conviction. We are going to build something so much more loving and abundant and compassionate and glorious than this. And it's so interesting also what you were saying about warring with self. And I think we absolutely do that. And it's even the little mini judgments we might make through a day of a friend or a neighbor or political tit for tat or whatever. All those mini judgments
Mhm.
actually add to this whole collective of separation and polarization and division. And I think we're starting to see that so clearly. And what really is land, it's so interesting what you were saying at the beginning, because what has landed in an even bigger way for me today, I always knew it was one organic consciousness that we were living in, whether you're a plant or a person or a planet. It's one kind of almost superorganism of one consciousness. But it's landed even more that each one of us is just, whether you're a plant or a person or a planet, is just really on a spectrum of consciousness.
Mhm.
It's on a spectrum of consciousness to some degree. So we often think we need to change our reality by fighting or forcing in a 3D way against something out there. But actually the whole thing is an inner shift, isn't it?
I can't see it any other way. I mean, it's just, right down to a personal level too. It's like we know that when we make shifts within ourselves, that the outer landscape demonstrates that shift. And I, way back in the day, there's a physicist named Fred Allen Wolf. He was in the movie What the Bleep,
Yeah,
like long ago, right? But he had to he made one of my favorite quotes, which was, there is no out there out there.
yeah,
And I sat with that for such a long time, and simple statement again. But if there is no out there out there, then I actually have more to say about how the world goes than so if I'm altering something within myself, if I'm finding a more loving place within myself, if that thing that I always beat myself up for, I can have a little bit more love and compassion for. I literally have just added love and compassion to the world. And it's not I mean, the kids on the spectrum shared this over and over again too. It's like you think that you're separate. I mean, we've so conditioned to believe that we are separate. And yet everything that we do for ourselves and in support of our own inner wisdom, you might say, is the very thing that we're then able to broadcast out. It's like we can't offer what we don't have. So this opportunity to give it to ourselves. And I also think it's beautiful as we're practicing giving that to ourselves to give it to others, because sometimes it's easier to give to others than it is to give to ourselves. But I don't think that we can miss that part
yeah.
and create real change in the physical world.
Yeah, I really, really agree with you. And I agree with all you've said there, Susie, because I so often say, yeah, there's no out there. You live from the inside out, not the outside in. I had a recent wonderful conversation with Paul Levy, who's a Tibetan Buddhist, and we were talking about absolutely this principle that everything is created from inside of you. If you're broadcasting peace and love to the world, you're going to see it in your reality in a bigger way than if you're broadcasting anger or frustration or all the rest. And it's interesting what you were saying. I think it was before we pressed the record button about feeling more peace, because certainly in the last little while, and I can't quite pinpoint the date. Was it March 16 or maybe a little before that? I think it was actually the end of December when 3-eye atlas was flying by Earth. I think it was then, round about the solstice. But I just started to feel this even deeper sense of peace and bliss within
Mhm.
myself. And I know a lot of people that I'm connecting with locally and on Zoom are feeling the same. And although I've always been a huge lover of nature and animals and, always thank the trees, I'm doing that more and in a bigger way. I'm thanking the sun for coming up in the morning. I'm blessing the trees. I'm sending love to the trees and the plants. And when I hear the bird song, I'm thanking the birds. So I'm moving through more of my days with a sense of the sacred and with grace, I think, than I did before. There's been quite a shift, and feeling, despite everything that's happening out there, I actually feel more profoundly peaceful.
Same. Yeah, it's like there just feels like there's a stillness.
Yeah,
And one of the things that has been happening in the New World Portal lately, too, it's this idea that when there's a part of ourselves that's challenged, we have a tendency to pay attention to that and try to work out the challenge. But if there's a part of us that's challenged, there's also an aspect of us that can, in our totality, in our wholeness, that can support that challenge. So that's brought a lot of stillness in too. It's like, oh, okay, this keeps coming up, this feeling or this sadness or this overwhelm because the world is maybe the way it is. And then and then maybe something like, well, that divine mother within me can hold that. Let's breathe that in. Let's breathe that into the heart space. Or, just it's almost like there's a counterbalance. There's a wholeness that's available to anything that arises within us. And I am noticing that, with everything that's going on, that seems to be bringing in a stillness as well. Does that make sense? It's like
absolutely.
yeah, and I think it's also the conditioning to start looking for what within us is already whole. That question keeps coming up as well. It's, on those days where we can all feel a little discombobulated with everything that's going on. Okay, that's true, but there's that ancient wisdom, that ancient place within us would say, yes, but we're already whole. Yes, but that wholeness already exists. Let's start to breathe that in. Let's start to cultivate that. And I love that for that inner stillness, that inner presence.
Yes, because if we think that every personal challenge we have is actually happening for us, not to us, that
Right.
means there must be a solution within us.
Yes.
That every
Yeah.
possibility is already inherent within us because we are one. We are all of it. And Yeah, so I really love that. And we so often think, if we're watching the news, there is only one dominant reality and nothing else, and that's just not true. There are 8 billion different realities and more than that, because there are many we haven't lived yet. So I think this is really how I understand sovereignty and inner authority, that we take command of creating our reality in a bigger way than we've ever done, and say, right, I'm going to swivel that whole paradigm that I've lived in all of my life, and probably many, many lifetimes, that I always think that the defined reality is out there. I'm going to swivel that and say, no, from today, even as a game, as an
Yeah.
experiment, I'm
Mhm.
going to choose the emotion that I'm going to dominate my day with. I'm going to dominate it with joy or love or peace or whatever, and just watch what happens. Just watch how it
Well,
changes the dynamics in relationship.
and I think that word choose is the important one because we can all just go along with the conditioning, pay attention to war, pay attention to division, pay attention to separation, or we can see that and then choose to say, okay, I know that exists, but I'm choosing love, I'm choosing compassion, I'm choosing understanding, I'm choosing to be one with these elements of myself that are bigger than maybe I perceived I could be. It's like more than I could perceived I could be. But the moment that we turn our attention there, right? Attention, intention, that's where that field grows. And, it's that idea that we're all that is, ever has been, ever will be. I love that phrase. All that is, ever has been, ever will be. But what plays out through us is where our attention and intention is. So within all that is, we can pick anything. I mean, we're amazing creators. We can pick anything. But the moment we start placing our attention in what we want to create, it has to come to pass. If there is no out there, as we're cultivating that field, the outer landscape begins to reflect that back to us. So,
Yeah, 100%. And Susie, you're probably aware, I know you're not an astrologer, but you're probably aware we have this massive pileup of planets in April, in Aries. I think I was looking at this morning, and if we add in some of the dwarf planets and centaurs, etc., I think we've got 10 orbiting bodies in Aries, which is just extraordinary. And from your very gifted point of view, particularly having gone through the Aries equinox, what's your thought on that? What's your feeling on that pile up in Aries? I mean, for me, it's very much, initiation, ignition, new beginning, sovereignty, pioneering, take a risk, all of that. But from your sort of different perspective, which has such psychic sensitivity and insight, what are you feeling about that?
well, all of that you just said, and just expanded exponentially, because to me, it's like, as you were saying, all these different planets, even dwarf planets, to me, those feel like they're different dimensions of ourselves. Like each one of those might represent a different dimension of our wholeness. And if you've got a lineup of expansion and you've got a lineup of new beginnings and all of that, it's not, to me, it feels like it's not just hitting us um, in like the old kind of cognitive way. It's not just knowledge that we're expanding, it's embodiment that it's the embodiment. We're expanding through embodiment. We're expanding through different dimensions and realms. We're expanding in our relationship with not just this solar system, but other solar systems. I mean, to me, it's all lining up to be a really clear representation of wholeness, of oneness. Yeah, that's,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, absolutely. And it's the embodiment, isn't it? Because the particular thing, the unique thing about this rapid evolution, this rapid ascension we're going through at the moment, is that we're doing it through our physicality, that we have to feel it, that we're like antennae, if you like, between heaven and earth, with all these very high frequency light codes coming in and light coming out of the earth, listening to, David Clement sharing that. And so we're kind of sandwiched in between them, taking it through our bodies, but it's that sense of embodiment that is creating new earth. It's not an out there, it's an in here. It's an alchemical process within you, and if you can start to feel that sense of deep peace and bliss, then that's the new earth frequency,
Yeah.
isn't it? You're getting in touch with it, and you can then manifest it in the world as you broadcast that frequency out. So I'm really excited because I see this as a kind of rebirth for humanity, that Aries energy, that real sense of rebirth, and a reimagining of who we really are that we've forgotten. And it's, yeah.
Yeah, a rebirth on in a multidimensional way, a rebirth in so that we're capable of holding and being more of that multidimensionality in our bodies, with our bodies, as our bodies. That's the embodiment piece that we're not um, we've been taught to pay attention to such a narrow spectrum of what's available to any given human being, right? And that's all being blown up now. I mean, literally, we're opening up through our own ancestral wisdom, through these planetary alignments, through Three Eye Atlas, and those reflections back to us. We're getting the opportunity to see that we are so much more than we have perceived ourselves to be. And as we don't just mentally know that, but as we embody that, we start to function from that. If we're functioning from more than we have perceived ourselves to be, the outer landscape can't end up any other place other than more than we have perceived it to be.
And it's so much of it is a remembrance, isn't it, Susie? That it's a clearing. It's like clearing a window or clearing away a veil. That we start to get back to this sense of expanded awareness and perception, which we may have had in ancient times. Lemuria is probably, our best example, and it's just been covered over with density. It's like we've been buried in this very contracted state, which is now opening up. And I think particularly when Uranus moves into Gemini on the 26th of April, I keep getting this image of blowing a dandelion and the spores, how the spores go in all directions because Gemini is mutable air. And
Mhm.
that big time brings in a sense of multidimensionality for me. And that's just in April, because obviously Uranus is the planet connected to the galactic beings as well, other realms, higher mind. And so I think that's going to be I get the sense of a big surge of energy coming in. I mean, Aries, all that Aries energy is primal fire, but a big surge of energy to reignite humanity again to what we already are and are re-remembering, as it were.
I think that's just it. And in our last conversation, we had a conversation about the autistics and the fact that, they're demonstrating skill sets that we as a collective humanity might not fully understand or might not have fully stepped into. And yet this is, I just see us becoming more sensitive, more interconnected, more a sense of wholeness coming from within us, not from outside, but that knowing within us. And I'm just watching this unfold so that if they've been hanging out in other realms and dimensions, kind of holding that awareness for us, and we've been slow but sure remembering that. I think some of these planetary alignments that are happening right now are just bridging that gap. We're coming into awareness that we too are so much more than we perceive to be. We too are stepping into our sensory systems in a really brand new way. I mean, instead of thinking our way through life, we're being invited to feel, to have a sensory experience through life. And, and because we've all been conditioned to the mind, I think when that first starts happening for anybody, it can be a little bit overwhelming because we're not used to feeling our way through life. We're used to thinking our way through. But all of these shifts that are happening within us, I think it's all part of our evolution. Some people are holding that field, waiting for us to get there. Other people are, like you say, that lightning rod of the body that's going through all those alterations between earth and sky, and that's where we're moving. I mean, it's happening in real time.
Yeah, and the autists, because you mentioned in our last conversation, the autists are calling this the reality revolution.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
And can you also share, before we hit the record button, Susie, you were talking, it was so interesting that the autists were saying that they're no longer reflecting our trauma collectively, but
Yeah.
they're reflecting our wholeness. And I'd love for you to expand on that because that was so beautiful.
Yeah, that was something that happened in the mentorship that I offer. And during that We always breathe into our heart space before that. Right during that time, it was like everybody in that mentorship was still. I mean, that energy was just still. And that was a red, not a red flag, that was a green flag, you might say. It was like, oh, that feels amazing, right? And so we were checking in with somebody, and during that time, we were practicing telepathy during that time. And all of a sudden, the collective consciousness of the kids came in, kind of moved aside the focus of that particular child, and said, we're no longer going to be needing to reflect back your separation. It's going to begin in small pockets and expand from there, but we'll be able to reflect back your wholeness. And I thought, wow, because this population has such a hard time being in their bodies because they're constantly reflecting, the fields of separation that we've all been conditioned to. So when I heard that, I was like going, okay, first in small pockets, and then it'll expand, which is always the way evolution happens. But I felt like I was getting a glimpse of collective humanity stepping more and more into their wholeness so that these kids would be able to reflect that back. But also, one of the things that happened like within a month of that comment was I started working with a frequency-based company, and they basically were able to create a bit of a field around the kids so that the kids were getting a reflection back of themselves instead of getting a reflection back of the chaos or the separation that they're usually engaged with because they're here in these bodies at this time. And all of a sudden, we were noticing with some of the families that we were trialing this with that, oh my gosh, the kids were happier, the kids were easier, they were more comfortable in their bodies, they were able to reflect back where their parents could be more comfortable in their bodies, where the parents were feeling better. So I'm I'm really watching this, Pam, as things move forward because if this population really does start to feel more comfortable in their body, if they start reflecting back and maybe even being able to more clearly share with us our own wholeness so that we can start building that again from the inside out, that's a game changer as far as I'm concerned, because to me, that says that field of consciousness, that field of oneness where they hang out all the time, is able to interface with collective human consciousness in a way that it's never been able to interface before. That requires us to be growing into our own wholeness, and it also can be reflected back by them. If that happens, I'm like,
Happy
yay!
dance, happy dance time. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's definitely a happy dance time. And, and I do have a tendency to see things, sometimes 10 years ahead, sometimes. So I don't know if this is 3 months, 3 years, or 30 years ahead. But the very fact that they even said that they would be able to reflect back our wholeness, I was just elated because it lets me know where we're going as a humanity.
Yeah, yeah, beautiful. And I've heard you in light of that, Susie. I've heard you refer to 2027 in
Yeah.
another conversation. I'd love just to get your views because the astrology changes a lot by 2027. I'd love to hear your views on where you think we'll be by then.
Yeah, I mean, just based on what the collective has shared with me, to me, that feels like a pivotal turning point. Like I was saying, like in small pockets, we're going to be able to reflect back wholeness. But by 2027, there's all kinds of information out there. I mean, I know Richard Rudd with the gene keys and human design, and different people are talking about this. But from my vantage point, most souls, if not all souls born from 2027 on, are going to have um, the same energetic template that autistic individuals have.
Wow.
Not necessarily in the challenge in being here, because those that have come before have been carving out a pathway, and that was a very challenging pathway to carve out. And so I have a lot of gratitude for that. But once we hit 2027, it's almost like more and more of the children are being born with that remembrance of oneness or that remembrance of their wholeness and a greater and greater capacity to embody that. So I think from 2027 on, we're just going to see the generations that are coming in holding more of who they are in truth, but in an embodied way.
Wow. And I know you've talked about I think you talked about the momentum of coherence, a coherence momentum by 2027. That a lot of us are talking about coherence and the importance of that right now, but again, smaller pockets. But it's going to be like a tsunami next year.
Well, yeah, and I see it as almost like soap bubbles of consciousness,
Yeah.
and we know this, it's like we're all a sphere of consciousness is the way I like to perceive it. And if you or I go out to the grocery store and we're moving through that space, anybody who's has any resonance with that sphere of consciousness that we're bringing into that grocery store is going to turn and look at us and smile.
Yeah.
They're going to they're going to notice something even though they don't consciously notice it. Somebody in that space might be very similar in frequency to, what is being offered, in that field, and that soap bubble just doubles.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. And you think about what you're doing, all the time, Pam, every day, all day, is like getting this information out. That field of consciousness is going out. It's not even physical proximity, right? It's all the other people in your community that are resonating with that. And that's a bigger field of consciousness.
It ripples out, and that's really exciting.
It's so exciting. And that's why, I think we can't underestimate what a small group of coherent individuals can do. And
Absolutely.
so it also goes back to if we're loving and compassionate and caring towards ourselves, if we're seeing or inviting the wholeness that we are back through our own fields, right? Then we're broadcasting that in real time on this physical planet. We're making change in the physical world. And I don't think that I know that the world can feel so complicated and so overwhelming. And at the same time, if we stay with that focal point,
Really simple.
we're literally expanding those soap bubbles of consciousness, those fields of consciousness, in real time. And we get to see it as that builds because, now you have a whole community that is aware of this. I have my community that's aware of these things. That, and they go out and touch other people. I just love that visual. It's just the expansion of those fields.
Yeah, I'm
So,
100% with you on that, Susie. I really, I feel that so deeply in the work I'm doing as well. So beautiful. And I'm aware you've got a hard stop in about 10 minutes. So is there any other message or any channeling or anything at all you'd like to share with the viewers before we close?
yeah, yeah. Let me hold on a second. I'm gonna step into light language because it's just much easier to get all the information that way. So,
No worries.
tatare kamande yung going gandai and then they song going jindande and gim anga ai o in dandio sanga goe kinema. So we literally have no real idea of who we are in truth until we actually start to become it. And as we become it, then we have questions and concerns, and maybe sometimes even some overwhelms because it's it's vast. Dadakakamandan gyungo and gyungo goekin amanda USM hoinging USM. But the more that we can nurture ourselves, love ourselves, have compassion for ourselves as we remember who we are in truth, and gengongunuin dandi USanta the kamanjanda USanta the Okoakem, the easier and easier it is to embody that truth. Yeah, that the we can't do that without love, compassion, and understanding. We can't do that with the old conditioning holding us in separation. And it's important to pay attention to how much support is in the world right now for us, to pay attention to where the support is, to pay attention of the much bigger reflections that are available to us at this time. Those reflections are just going to continue to increase, but we need to put our attention and intention into that energy. And then the Gyango Goekakam and then the Kuekam and the Juism, because we are and have always been co-creators with all that is. Yeah, tadakam ande Juisam tadakam enje osum agyo kuekin amandi Juisim and Joachim. Yeah, the field of expansion, this reality revolution is not just something to think about. It actually is something that we are invited to embody. And time to take the invitation.
Yeah,
So,
and to really live it day to day, to
yes,
to
yes,
walk the talk, to really live it moment to moment, and that's when you'll start to feel it. The more you do it, the more you
yeah,
practice, the deeper you feel the embodiment of that. So it's
yeah.
so beautiful, Susie. You have so many gifts, and just so thrilled that you've shared all this information with everyone, because I think they'll find it so inspiring in a kind of crazy world of chaos out there, that you can see such a clear vision of where we're headed. And we're right in it now, aren't we? We're right in this pivot point, crucible of change right now. And it's just thrilling that we're moving so quickly from an old 3D reality into something that's a much greater expanded perception, and, as you say, a much more multidimensional experience. It's amazing.
I think we just need to be easy on ourselves too, Pam. It's like I remember the collective saying at one time, you know, we never have gone through this in a body. In times past, we may have taken a big personal or collective evolutionary jump, but we went extinct for a time, or we had a mass die off of some sort in order to go through that. And I'm not saying that there aren't things like that going on, that there aren't pockets of people that are leaving in order to, you might say, lighten the field, what
I get
through
that.
their choice of leaving. But I think that it's so important to realize that this is a little bit challenging on the body. There is a lot going on, and we just need to be kind to ourselves. We need to be kind to the world as a whole, because this is a massive, like, I, this has never happened before, as far as I can tell. I mean, this has never been this way where we lived in a body through this kind of evolutionary change. And yeah, I'm always a fan of easier on us makes it easier on all. Yeah. So,
Beautiful. That's a wonderful place to end, Susie. And just thank you for being in the world. Thank you for being you. Thank you for all you do. Thank you for helping us to expand our field with so much love and generosity and heart. And I'm very grateful you're in my life as well. So hope everybody enjoyed that as much as I did, and I hope Susie did as well. But just God bless you, Susie, for all you're doing in the world. Thank you so much.
yeah, thank you.
Much love, everyone.